You said, there is no joy without pain, and there is no growth without loss.
And I see like this immediate guilt come over them, like this look of guilt in their face. And I always tell them, look, it's okay to have joy in the midst of sadness. It's okay to experience happiness and sadness at the same time.
Welcome to the Mindfulness Experience podcast. My name is Keith Fiveson. On this show, I had the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Jon Mackaskil, a retired Navy SEAL commander turned leadership and mindfulness coach. Jon served for 24 years in the Navy. He served in multiple, highly dynamic leadership positions from the battlefield to the operations center and the boardroom. His style of teaching leadership is unconventional, yet highly effective. In this show, we talked about his passion for working with leaders, using mindfulness techniques, and helping individuals become the best version of themselves. He uses coaching techniques and leadership mindset approaches that really focus on grit and resilience training. I hope you enjoy the show. Because you're really kind of like the guy who is a guy's guy. I mean, here you are. You've been in the Navy. You've been a commander. You've done tours of Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia, and you came back and you really have seen. You've been into the belly of the beast, if you will, right? And here we are. We're going to talk about leadership mindset, and we're going to talk about what it really takes to show up as a leader and to really be in that. One of the things you said, Jon, and just to introduce, I thought it was great. You said that there is no joy without pain, and there is no growth without loss. So I think that's probably a really good way to start, because I really want to hear your journey and really understand what you've been through, because you've been through a lot and you're still growing. You're still a young guy and you still have this beautiful young family and you're doing so many things. Give the listeners something about who you are, please.
Yeah, well, Keith, you've definitely done your homework. You went back and watched my sizzle reel for some of those tidbits of tidbits of I like to call them nuggets of knowledge or wisdom, but I don't know. I was just kind of spurting off when I had those recorded, but I do believe that I don't believe you can have joy without knowing the other side of the coin, right? It's the old yin and yang. How do you know what darkness is, or how do you know what light is, rather, if you don't know what darkness is? And so how do you know what joy is if you don't know what sadness and pain are? And then the growth. So many of us have almost like a risk aversion when there's a challenge or adversity or an obstacle that we can see coming. And, the natural human response is to dodge that obstacle or to dodge that adversity, dodge that challenge. But more often than not, the growth that we experience in life comes from those challenges, comes from those obstacles. We don't grow, or at least we don't grow as fast or as well if we're not challenged. It's just like physically, right? If you were to go into the weight room and you were to lift extremely light your entire life, you wouldn't get the physical benefits of that you would if you were to lift heavy and higher reps. So we get uncomfortable in the gym, we get uncomfortable physically, and we accept that. We're like, okay, yes, in order to grow physically, we're going to push ourselves into areas that are uncomfortable physically.
Right. But, and that's the nature of growth. I mean, it's commitment and challenge. There is, if you don't make a commitment to anything, you'll never be challenged. Right. I mean, the nature of commitment is challenge. Right. So, and for me, I really like this. I'm a two-time cancer survivor. Right. And when I got married with my wife, I had a cancer deal happen, and the minister said, the nature of joy is not like just happiness. It's happiness in the midst of pain or sorrow. It's recognizing the things that really are of value,
Right.
I'm
glad you said that too.
That.
A lot of the time, Keith, I've met with people who are in mourning for one reason or another. They've had a death in the family, they've had a death in the unit or the organization, or some other reason. They're in mourning, and there will be something that is funny, so even during that experience, and they will laugh, and I see like this immediate guilt come over them, like this look of guilt in their face, and I always tell them, hey, look, it's okay to have joy in the midst of sadness. It's okay to experience happiness and sadness at the same time. And we think that we are, these binary beings that experience only one emotion at a time. And if it's happiness, then it's happiness and happiness only. If it's sadness and sadness only. But it's not like that. We are not wired that way. We can be at a funeral and see something that is, somewhat humorous. And now, granted, there's social norms and what's socially acceptable, and you don't want to have this guttural laugh at a funeral necessarily. But maybe
that's a comedy movie.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe in your mind, still experience the beauty that's surrounding you. Even in a scenario where you may be at a funeral, there is still beauty, there is still happiness, and this life is far more complex. Our emotions and our ability to experience those emotions are far more complex than what we give ourselves credit for.
And I just want to stop there for a moment and just kind of recognize that we talked a little bit before the show, and this, and everyone should know that we're at this period with the Ukraine and people leaving their homes, and we're dealing with a lot of, and we just came through this huge COVID pandemic. We're still in it.
Right.
So from your viewpoint, how does that apply to be in the midst of, all of this pain or all of the sorrow or all of this, trauma, and really still find the joy that really goes on and says, let's go ahead and get up and make the coffee, and we're the kids, and, let's go out for a walk, that
right.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. No, I'm glad you mentioned that too. That's a great point. So many of us, if we see something happening on the other side of the world that is trauma inducing or anxiety inducing, we feel as though we need to take that trauma and anxiety on ourselves. And don't get me wrong, seeing something like that happening on the other side of the world is in fact anxiety inducing and is in fact traumatic, or can be. That doesn't mean that you cannot go out and still enjoy what it is we're afforded and blessed to enjoy. Now, that said, I like to really acknowledge the blessings that we have when I have that other side of the coin to compare it to. Now, I'm not saying that I go out and look for trauma and anxiety inducing incidents or instances so that I can say, hey, look, I've got it so great over here. I've got my health and my wealth, but those people over there don't. But at the same time, I can be thankful for it, right?
Yeah, it's a wake-up call.
It is absolutely a wake-up call. And that ties to the leadership aspect of what it was we're going to discuss.
Right.
A lot of the time, when we are leaders and our organization may have a downturn, or our team may lose, or our family may be in debt or have a health crisis, that doesn't mean that we can't, as leaders, still celebrate our small victories, celebrate our wins, and also celebrate what we do have. Kind of focus, and you and I have spoken about this before, not so much in this episode, but when you and I first were meeting, the the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. The scarcity mindset is basically thinking that there's only so much pie to go around, and that we need to defend our piece of that pie at all odds, against all odds. Well, there's so much that is like that, sure, but there's also so much that is an abundance mindset, saying, hey, there's so much pie, I can share my pie with everyone. And really, as a leader, I think we need to have that abundance mindset more often, and celebrate what we do have and what we can share and give to others, so that maybe we can bring them up out of whatever it is they're experiencing.
So along that line, I mean, leaders are dealing with, we've got the Great Resignation. We have a lot of people who are, sick and tired of being sick and tired. They're stressed out. They're resigning. And leaders are dealing with a lot of issues. You talk about, again, on your reel, I love that reel. On your reel, you talked about preparedness, resilience, grit, and compassion. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because one of the things that, I was in the customer experience area for, close to 30 years, and we were always dealing with, the 20% of the people were high performers. 50% of the people, 50 or 60% of the people were kind of average performers. And then, 20 to 30%, and it always varied, were just sort of, you couldn't wait to get them out of the organization. And now, the overall connection or the overall engagement numbers are really quite bad. I mean, we have, disengagement, and we've got active disengagement, which are people who are talking down corporations. And I think a lot of that has to do with trauma. I think a lot of it has to do, in my view, with societal trauma, that people are just sort of, trying their best to get along in a job that may or may not pay them $15 an hour or more. And, what can you expect from, people, and how do leaders do that? How do they prepare? How do they build resilience and grit and compassion within their organization? I know we'll probably need more than 25 minutes to talk about this, Jon, but I'm hoping that you've got at least some tidbits, given your wisdom and your experience, working literally in the battlefield.
Sure. Well, I mean, first off, I think a lot of what you said is 100% true. All of what you said is 100% true. But the resignation, so many of the other things that we have going on, I think, are stemming from exhaustion. I mean, we as a human race, we as the global community have been through a lot in the last 2 year. And to say a lot is certainly an understatement. It's unprecedented what we've been through, at least in modern history. So I like to start off by giving us credit. I mean, we've gone through a lot, so it's not surprising that we're exhausted.
Those who have survived, I mean, because we have survived, and there's a huge number of people. What is it? 6 million, 7 million people who passed.
Yeah. I've stopped looking at the numbers, to be completely honest, but I know it's enormous. Yeah. And again, it's unprecedented in modern history. But coming back to the preparedness, resilience, grit, and compassion, I mean, that's what I talk on quite often. And in developing those, one, you have to understand what they are. And so preparedness, I mean, the name says it all, or at least the word says it all for that one in particular, but we often neglect that one. And when I say preparedness, I don't mean being a doomsday prepper or anything. And if your audience are preparing for doomsday, more power to them. But what I use that term for is being always ready. And my wife was in the Coast Guard before she joined the Navy, and the slogan for the Coast Guard is Semper Paratus, which is always ready or always prepared. And that's what we as leaders need to make sure we are, but we also need to make sure our entire organization is prepared for what may come, prepared for the foreseeable events that may come, but also prepared for the unforeseeable. And that takes planning. So I teach mindfulness meditation now, and I'm talking about planning for the future, it sounds almost as though I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. But in order to be prepared, you need to know where you are. So that's the mindfulness piece. You need to know what assets you have available, what your people's strengths and weaknesses are in the now, and then work to tweak those, develop those strengths, develop those weaknesses into strengths, and then find out again what assets you have available and not available, and fulfill the ones that you will need.
So that's good. That's really good, because when we talk about it from a business viewpoint, like with leaders who are, and there are different kinds of leaders, whether or not they're in organizations or corporations or whatever, but there is this journey. Everybody goes on a journey. There's the employee journey, there's the onboarding, the training, the development, all of that, understanding the tools, technology, and the systems, and the way, things get done. And then there's the customer journey, which is, what should they expect, whether or not it's online or speaking with someone or in the store or whatever. There's that journey. And I love this idea of, it being a stage. Life is one big stage, and we're all just actors, right? And if you don't know your lines, and if you're not prepared, then what is the term? Poor performance, or
proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
Thank you very much. We can say that. That's not nowadays. Anything goes, John. So it's okay, right? So, but there is that idea of what are the tools? What's the tools? The team, the timing, and what should we expect, and what should they expect as a result of that? So this preparedness is really very broad, and then there's that idea of just doing it, right?
Right. Yeah, winging it, right?
Yeah.
As a team member, the last thing I want is for my leader, my commander, to be winging it. I mean, certainly there will be times they are, but for the most part, I want them to be prepared. I want them to know the branches and sequels, as we call them in the military, but basically planning for the unforeseeable, planning for the contingencies that are going to happen, whether that's on a military operation or in life. We didn't foresee a pandemic coming, but we definitely could have prepared for that by preparing our families for potential health losses to the family, preparing them financially for what was going to happen with what happened in finances, preparing our homes. There's a lot of things that, again, I don't want to sound like a doomsday prepper, but there's a level of preparedness that a leader needs to have, whether they're a leader of a team, an organization, or a family.
Right. I don't think you're being a doomsday prepper at all. I just want to, I want to back up a bit.
Sure.
And just say, I think that, from the standpoint of leadership, right? You've got this hindsight, what's been happening, what's happening internally, what's happening externally, right? And then insight, what can we do as a team to go ahead and fortify our resources, go ahead and make sure we're prepared for what has happened, which looks on a trajectory in terms of foresight and what may happen. So there's hindsight, insight, foresight, but not many organizations really do the insight stuff.
Right.
And it seems to me that that's really what you've been really trying to give them the tools to have some of that insight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
And Teresa Larson, who she often compares what we talk about in this kind of scenario as she's a Marine veteran. She talks about land navigation, and in order to get where you want to go, you need to know where you are. Right. And that's where the insight comes into play, is you have to take a pause, take stock in who you are and where you are, what you need and what you have to get where you want to go. And that's absolutely critical piece to being prepared.
Right. While I was listening to you, I just did the stop meditation,
Yeah.
You stop, you take a pause, you observe what's going on, and then you proceed, or you look at your landscape and you do that. So that's great. So is that part of the preparedness and the resilience and the grit and compassion? Is that where that kind of comes in for you and the work that you do with organizations?
Yeah. I mean, it all ties together, the resilience and the grit piece. A lot of the time you'll hear those terms used interchangeably, and I don't necessarily feel that they're the same, but they are connected. So the resilience is being able to bounce back after getting knocked down. And that's tied to the challenges that we were talking about, growth through adversity, growth through overcoming obstacles. I don't believe it's just that. I believe it's getting back up, but then learning why you got knocked down. And in the military, we have, after every operation, be it training operation or real world operation, we have a debrief or an after action report, after action review. And we learn from our mistakes. We learn what we did right. We learn what we did wrong. We learn what we could have done better. And that's how we become better as an organization. That's how we become better as operators. Well, the same applies in real life. If we have a failure, perceived failure, and I'm doing air quotes right now for those of you who are listening and not watching, it's only a failure if you don't learn from it.
Right.
So you learn from it and you grow from it. So that's the resilience piece. You come back, but you don't just come back. You come back better. You come back stronger. You come back faster. That's what I perceive as resilience, and you can do that through, one, preparedness is knowing what you have on hand and what you may need for the future. But then two is also doing that after action review, that personal after action review, and finding out what you learned, what you did wrong, what you did right. And then the grit piece, grit is just basically setting a long-term goal and then sticking to that long-term goal. And it's very hard to do quite often. But what I always tell people to do is start by setting small goals and achieving those small goals, and then celebrating those victories, and in your mind, setting up new neural pathways to stick to something. So like a lot of the time what we do as humans, every year, right around December 30th, 31st, we set a New Year's resolution, and halfway through January, that thing is long gone. We're not sticking to it. But what we could do rather is set a small goal, like, hey, this week I will get into the gym 4 times. And that's your small goal. You attain that. You say, okay, great job. All right, I did it. Then say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I'd like to get into the gym 8 times.
Right.
And then you set that precedent for yourself, and you continue to celebrate the victories. And by the end of the year, so rather than setting this huge goal at the beginning of the year, maybe start by setting small goals. And then by the end of the year, you're saying, you know what, for the next month, I'm going to get into the gym 20 times. Right. And you're doing it. And then you look back on your year and you say, oh, wow, you know what, I just had a great year physically. Right. Well, the same obviously applies to just about anything. But yeah, set small goals and then achieve those. And then coming back full circle to what we keep discussing is overcoming and growing through overcoming challenges and adversity. Intentionally put yourself into spots where you're going to have to overcome. Intentionally put yourself into spots that you're uncomfortable.
Right.
It's the old man in the arena.
Challenge. Yeah.
It's a challenge. Absolutely. If you challenge yourself, you're going to grow. If you don't, you're not. That's bottom line.
Right. Yeah. There's no traction, right? You can't get anywhere without traction.
Right.
And that really requires a bit of friction and the ability. I work with people who are really dealing with compulsions and misuse, if you will, behaviors, drinking, drugging, eating, sexing, spending, things that really throw them off. And it's not that they don't work. It's just that they use them to the point where they can't really function appropriately. So, the ability to really kind of do something, again, to your point, I talked to Dr. Andrew Tatarsky, who's really working in the harm reduction area, and he was really talking about what you're talking about, which is just set yourself small goals. You don't have to, it takes 21 days to make a habit, 3 days to break it. Okay, you went crazy at the food bar over the weekend. Yeah, you had too much macaroni and cheese and too many pizzas. I get it. Start off, just kind of have a salad and just kind of be easy. You know, and that kind of leads us into the whole area of compassion, right?
Right. Yeah. So again, I want to define it first, right? When I talk about compassion, I'm not talking about sympathy, and I'm not talking about empathy. And Brene Brown does a great job on her Netflix special and then her YouTube videos.
Changed my life. I love that. I love
Fantastic.
her vulnerability, leadership, wholeheartedness, right?
Yes. Yes. And she talks about how, vulnerability and courage, they're not on separate ends of the spectrum. They're right there together. Right. But yes, compassion is essentially empathy with willing to help out, to actually do something, action tied to empathy. And when I talk about empathy, I'm not just talking about empathy or compassion, rather, I'm not just talking about compassion for others. Certainly, as a leader, we should have compassion for others, but we also need to have compassion for ourselves. We need to have compassion, understanding what we need, understanding when we fall short, give ourselves grace. Right. Now, when I say give ourselves grace, I don't mean give ourselves grace just because we want it. If we need grace, then give ourselves grace. So, example, waking up again, I kind of default to the gym as my example often. So
great. I need to get back to the gym, Jon.
Yeah. So what I mean is, let's say today I set a goal in my mind. I'm saying, okay, today is, what is today? Tuesday. Okay. So tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to start a new routine and I'm going to get to the gym. I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and do that. When my alarm goes off at 5 a.m., a lot of the time people say, you know what, I can sleep another 30 minutes. I'll get a workout in later today. Then later today comes and they're like, well, I can get it later this afternoon. And then it never happens.
Right.
You're giving yourself grace because you want it in that situation, not because you need it. Now, the other situation is, let's say you're sick, or maybe you really have been grinding hard at work and you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night and you need an extra hour of sleep.
Right.
Then give yourself the grace, but don't just give it to yourself because you want it. That's where you miss your goals. That's where you start to lose grit. That's where you start to lose the resilience. But self-compassion is critically important to your health and your performance, but also in you being the best leader you can be. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, then you can't take care of your team. Now, I do believe in taking care of your team, absolutely. But in order to do that, I need to be the best version of myself that I can be.
Right. So, and then there's the flip side of that, which is judgment, right? Because we wind up, I talk about, the inhale and the exhale. The inhale is sort of the inhale around, compassion, right? The exhale is the judgment. Like when you exhale, I think it's much easier to hold an inhale than it is to hold an exhale, right?
Yes.
Because within the inhale, you've got that, you're opening yourself up. And within the exhale, there's nothing there. There's nothing really to bring in. So, that compassion and judgment and being able to hold the space, but then you pointed out sort of like stupid compassion, right? Which is, the idea that, I'm not really doing the work and I'm giving myself a free ticket to basically, fathood.
It's your get out of jail free card.
Right.
You haven't done the work, but you're giving yourself the credit.
It doesn't work, so I might as well go get another beer and eat another pizza. What the hell? I'm not going to the gym, I might as well celebrate.
Right. Yes.
It doesn't work.
It's the all or nothing mentality, right? You're like, okay, well, I didn't get to the gym, so I may as well eat really poorly. So, I mean, you gotta give yourself grace again. Okay, I didn't get to the gym today because I didn't sleep well last night. So I needed that extra 30 minutes, right? Now you're giving yourself that grace, but that doesn't mean you go all the way overboard and say, well, I didn't get to the gym, so now I need to go eat a pizza and a cake and a donut and a hot dog on top of it and wash it down with a 40-ounce beer.
Exactly.
It's you gotta have moderation, and then you gotta
not in my state. That ain't happening here. That's not happening here. So there is this preparedness, the resilience, the grit, the compassion, and you wrap all those up. Now you've got within a culture, we had Anakin Day on, and we were talking about tribal cultures and the whole idea of getting everybody onto the same vision, the whole idea of the mission, the whole idea of where are we going as a team, and what are the metrics and what are the things that are going to go ahead and how are we all going to be accountable, and how are we going to hold each other accountable within that that organization or that culture itself. So what you're really talking about really overlays to that, in my view, because here you've got the preparedness, the leadership saying, hey, we better be prepared. Do we have all the stuff on board, right? And then you've got the resilience. Okay, how are we going to go ahead and help each other out? How are we going to keep each other accountable? Yeah, you need to get some sleep. You need to take a time out. You need to take a breath, if you will, so that you can reset, reboot, come back online. And then the grit, which is, okay, we can do this, we got this, we can go ahead and move forward. And then the compassion side of it is give yourself a break, give yourself a break and give people a break, as long as they're holding their weight, as long as they're doing their stuff, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I believe that the intersection of those four attributes that's where true leadership is, and very effective teams, that's where they are. I feel that a lot of the time in leadership courses we talk about vision and courage and faith and integrity and honesty and all these other leadership attributes, and I believe in those, absolutely do, but I believe all of those fall into those four buckets that I described. If you have resilience, if you have preparedness, if you have grit and compassion, you're going to have a vision that comes with preparedness. You're going to have courage that comes with grit and resilience. You're going to have faith in your people and integrity. It comes with those four. That's where I feel, again, the intersection of those four, it's kind of the Venn diagram, if you will, where those four circles overlap. That's where you have the most effective leaders and most effective teams. And if you're missing just one, you're setting yourself up and you're setting your team up for failure.
So Jon, I'm really eager to hear how your view of how mindfulness, from a team viewpoint, from a collective viewpoint, from a cultural viewpoint, how does that help? How does it really enhance? How does it lift up? How does it make people aware of each other, of the overall, culture and the preparedness, the resilience, the grit and the compassion? How does mindfulness lift that up? Because it doesn't seem, all of these attributes are great. We see them on posters, we see them in organizations, we see the PowerPoint stuff, but how does the rubber hit the road when we get into the now moment, when we get into this moment now, now?
Great question, Keith. So with regards to preparedness, and we touched on this briefly, but again, in order to get where you want to go, you need to know where you are right now. And that means as an organization, that means as an individual. And in order to truly be honest with yourself as an individual and as an organization, practicing mindfulness, which is nothing more than being aware of the present situation, situational awareness, as we call it in the tactical terms. If you don't have that situational awareness, then how can you be prepared? So mindfulness comes fully into play, 100% there. The resilience and the grit. Having resilience, again, a lot of that comes from growth through adversity, and then questioning yourself afterwards, saying, what did I learn? How could I be better? Well, if you're not mindful, you're not going to do that introspective work. You're not going to be contemplative and be able to ask the right questions. And then you're most likely not going to be honest with yourself, even if you do ask the right questions. So that's the resilience piece and how mindfulness is tied to that.
Yeah. So grit. I like, and the grit, I like that a lot, because there really is a call for, being present and being aware of what's going on in the moment, right? And then and going back. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, again, it's tied to preparedness and the resilience. As far as it being tied to grit, it takes effort and discipline to meditate. It takes effort and discipline to be mindful in your life. I mean, it's very easy to not be mindful. So again, coming to the growth through adversity, that grit is developed by doing things that are difficult. Sure, sitting and meditating looks easy, but you know just as well as I do, sitting down and meditating is not easy. Sitting down and making the time, even allocating time in your calendar, that takes effort and discipline. And then actually doing it, that takes effort and discipline. And grit comes through doing things that require effort and discipline. So that's how the grit is developed. And then finally, the compassion piece, again, doing introspective and contemplative work to know who you are, what you need, to know what your team is and what they need. It takes time, it takes discipline. And when you do meditate, when you do live mindfully, you're more aware. That's the awareness comes into play. You're more aware of what you need and what your team needs. So it comes full circle, and it comes on each one of those attributes. Mindfulness is going to benefit each one of those attributes, and as they all benefit, as they all grow, your preparedness, your resilience, your grit and compassion, that improves you as a leader, and improves your organization as a team.
Right. And I like I like that a lot. And I like what it goes with, because I look at mindfulness, the wings of mindfulness being compassion and wisdom. And then I also look at the leadership as the spirit of the organization. And the spirit of the organization really provides this aspiration. They inspire, they aspire, they help, and then the root word of spire or breath is spire, S-P-I-R. Right. And, that's the root word in inspire, to aspire, to perspire. It's really breathing life into the organization. And what you've really talked about was the ability of the leader then to aspire them to be prepared, to go ahead and have resilience, grit, and compassion with it for themselves as well as for their mission together. And then to breathe life into that is, how the leader goes about doing the work that they do, giving space for people, but also holding them accountable, right? And right. I just think that's absolutely wonderful. So I'm looking at the time here, and I can't believe that we're almost like at time. This is like gone by. So how is that possible, Jon? I'm not sure how that's possible. But one of the things that I was, we wanted to get into the leadership mindset and the idea of what you've been doing and the work around that. Now, one of the things I'm really familiar with that I wasn't familiar with before, as I started to learn who you are and what you're involved with, is you've got loads of websites. You've got loads of websites for people to go to. Like you've got Mackaskil Consulting, you've got Strum on the Go, which I looked at that looks like a really great product.
I use it every day. It's right here.
Well, there you go. You've got BAMO, people want to know what BAMO is, since I just mentioned it. Really, what is it?
Yeah, so BAMO is Breathe and Move On. And that's from My Steady Mind, which is one of the companies that I coach with to teach cognitive fitness and mindfulness.
I love it.
So breathe and move on.
Breathe and move on. Like let that stuff go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're involved with the M2 experience, the mindfulness and movement experience that we were talking about with Dr. Teresa. MTM, what is MTM? Can we lift that up a moment?
MTM, sure. MTM is Men Talking Mindfulness. That's myself and Will, where we have a podcast talking about mindfulness and all things surrounding or connected to mindfulness and overall mental and physical health.
Great podcast. Love you guys. And you've got like a talk about a bromance. You guys definitely have a bromance going on.
Will's going to be here tomorrow.
Oh, is he really?
Will and Teresa are both going to be in Colorado Springs tomorrow.
Oh, that's excellent. Please give them a big hearty hello and a big high five. And then you've got Mission 60, right? And that's your other website.
Yeah. So Mission 60 is a leadership organization that I subcontract under. And then, so it's founded by Jason Van Camp, who is a retired Green Beret, and he's written a book along with some of his compadres entitled Deliberate Discomfort, which is exactly what we've been discussing today, is growth through adversity and overcoming challenges. And deliberate discomfort is then tied to Mission 60 and a challenge that he has, a deliberate discomfort challenge, which is 60 days of 6 different domains that work to just basically improve you as a human being. As a human being, yeah. As a human being, not a human doing.
It's a BIOS upgrade. I love it.
Yes.
Right? That's great. Now, one of the things that we didn't talk about, and I just had a question about, was you're doing work in virtual reality, right?
I am.
And what does mindfulness in virtual reality? How do they mix up? Because you know, one of the things I talk about is the flight simulator. You know. Yeah. Tell me.
So funny you should ask that. I really did not see the intersection of those for the longest time, and then I had my eyes opened, quite literally and figuratively, to the world of virtual reality and how that could tie into mindfulness. So a lot of people, you know, when they first start out meditating or living mindfully, they need guidance. And so they'll go to a smartphone app and download any number of meditation apps that are out there and start meditating. And for some people that works. For some, they need a little extra to keep them focused on the here and now in the meditation. And that's where where virtual reality can come into play with mindfulness. They can put you into a virtual setting out in nature that may help to calm the mind to start a meditation. So for instance, waterfalls, there's a meditation app that I use on my virtual reality headset that is waterfalls and looking around and seeing the green that's surrounding these waterfalls. And then it's got, you know, calming music playing, and then it's got the guided meditation on top of it all. Now, you know, personally, I prefer now my own personal meditations in quiet space, alone, no guidance, just on my own. But that's taken me a long time to get to where I am. And there are days when I don't feel like running myself through a meditation and I still want to be guided. So I will throw the headset on and be taken to a beautiful, you know, scenery and beautiful music, calming voice, much like yours, Keith. I think you should start doing some meditations for these virtual reality companies. And then it, you know, it takes me to a place where I can calm down, calm my body down, my mind, my nervous system. So there is a marriage between those, which was not intuitive when I first heard about it. But yeah, virtual reality is great, and you know, there's a lot of meditation apps that are out there already in the virtual reality metaverse.
Well, we're going more and more there, I think, in terms of the flight simulator. I mean, we're already there in some respect in terms of the metaverse or the digital sphere or whatever we want to call it. But I think in the real world, which is where we are day to day, you know, we've got enough challenges. How do people get a hold of you, Jon, if they want to go ahead and learn more, book you, go ahead and have you come into the organization and do some work with you?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time when I'm on any social media. I've actually deleted my Instagram. I found that was too distracting, and I've started limiting my time on Facebook. But if I am on social media, it's LinkedIn, and you can just search my name there, or you can go to jonmackaskil.com, and that'll take you to all the different links that I'm a part of, or all of the different organizations that I'm a part of.
Right, and that's how we connected on LinkedIn, and you're one of the top providers over there as well. So you're just doing some great work, Jon. I really enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the time with you, and I'm going to have to get out to Colorado Springs myself and spend some time as well.
Love to visit.
Yeah, I'd really like to do that. So I want to thank you very much for coming on the show, and you know, we'll lift this up as best as we can going forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My honor, Keith. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being a part of the Mindfulness Experience podcast. I hope you enjoyed this frank and honest discussion with Jon Mackaskil. I certainly did, and I hope you gained some valuable insights on leadership that you can take with you to start and develop your own program, whether or not you're in an organization or individually. Please follow the podcast to connect to future episodes. As well, subscribe, leave us a review, or suggest topics that you'd like to hear. Connect with us on our social media channels. Visit our website at workmindfulness.com for more mindfulness experiences. Thank you again. See you next time. Take care.